Hi guys, welcome back to Bookstr Talks. I'm Saoirse here, Associate Editor at Bookstr, and I'm very happy to be joined by Pierce Brown, author of the Red Rising series. Pierce, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
Good. So I mean, obviously we wanted to talk a lot about you've put together the entire Red Rising universe, of which we could talk about for several videos. But obviously today we wanted to talk a lot about your Sons of Ares graphic novel volume 2, so this is the Wrath one. So, generally you've spoken before in a lot of different things about not expecting to become an author. How did it kind of come about? And do you think, where do you think you'd be if it hadn't been for your writing career instead?
Oh God, I'd probably be in a cubicle somewhere or like digging a pit. I swear to God, I have the worst organizational skills ever, which all my teachers said would come back to bite me. This is, We're not teaching you what to think, we're teaching you how to think and try to organize. But God, that's a skill that's always evaded me, which is funny because you end up writing, 3,500 pages of science fiction universe, and organization someplace sometimes would come in handy. But yeah, you mentioned I didn't think I'd ever become an author, and it's 100% true. But I think that's the way a lot of people start the craft, is because they are readers, and every author who ever was probably a reader. And I think that for me, the journey was basically I'd run through everything in fantasy and sci-fi that I could get my hands on, and I had this lull after high school, and I just started writing on my bed this ridiculous story of a dragon hunt or something. It was probably copied straight out of Game of Thrones or something. But
right. No copyright here.
yeah, but I didn't make any money off it, that's for certain. So it kind of got the creative juices flowing, and then I started ripping into this. I don't even know what came over me, but I kind of started ripping into this epic fantasy novel that I started writing when I was 18. And we just moved again. We moved so much as a kid, when I was a kid. So we were at 3 years, each state 4 years. So I went to I think 11 schools all told. And you can't take your friends with you. You're always breaking into new social hierarchies. There's always the stress of being the new kid. Half the time was in the middle of the school year. And so books were a lot of times my respite. They were my friends that I took with me on every move. We did a lot of family road trips, going back to family in Iowa and Colorado. And it was always reading in the back. So it seems like a natural progression to become a writer after, reading as much as I could and at the dinner table and, till 4 a.m. in the morning.
Right. And reading in the back of a car is a particularly good trait, so I'm very impressed you can do that, because I can't.
Oh yeah,
I can't make it 2 minutes down the road.
Yeah, my sister gets too nauseous. She can't do the
way too car sick.
I'd get nauseous, but it's probably because when we stopped at gas stations, we all had 10 minutes. My dad is very strict on 10-minute rule to choose your snacks, and I was
that's pressure.
Yeah, I got chocolate milk and beef jerky, so I pitied my parents.
Some drive.
Farting away. Yeah, it was a really
beef jerky in one hand and a fantasy novel in the other. That sounds like a great setup, just not in a car.
I still get beef jerky. I'm lactose intolerant these days, but I still.
There you go. And so with Red Rising is obviously a fantasy series. Do you find do you kind of find yourself confined to that as a genre? Or do you even have that in your mind when you're writing? Or does it just happen that what you're writing is coming out as a fantasy series? Or do you go into it thinking, right, this is going to be in space, this is going to be here, this is going to be this, or does it just kind of happen organically for you?
Well, it's a good question. I think that, being within a genre helps you understand the expectations on the work. Mm-hmm. And then if you're trying to subvert those expectations, you have a good, outline or prism to go off of, so to speak. So I know kind of language of sci-fi and fantasy. I know a lot of the things and the tricks that have been used, but I also know how I want to comment, invert, or change something that I've seen before. So in a lot of ways, it's given me all the tools in the sandbox to play with,
Right, yeah.
Bringing things from another sandbox is always fun. So I look at Red Rising in many ways as historical fiction, just written in the future, or about the future.
Right.
You look back, a lot of my inspiration for it isn't so much fantasy series or even sci-fi series as it is history. particularly obsessed with this 150-year period in the Roman Republic transition to empire, that I think is filled with these larger-than-life historical figures like, Cicero, Caesar, Sulla, Gaius Marius, who then I draw inspiration from. So, like, when I'm looking to brainstorm for a new book, I read history. I don't, read fantasy novels. And I think Red Rising is a sum of a lot of different parts because of that.
That's great. I guess it kind of means that you're not tied to that either, because it means that going forward it can be whatever you want it to be, which is always great.
Yeah, and there's some books in fantasy and sci-fi that go pulpy, but I try to make it kind of like a hybrid creature as opposed to, being a noir fantasy, which you kind of know what you're getting into.
Right. And so obviously your series has quite a big following and quite a big fan base. Do you find that, the opinions of fans and the fandom as a whole, does that influence your writing ever? Or do you kind of take those things on board? Or do you notice that fans might notice something you hadn't thought of, or, come to things in a different way?
Well, multi-part question, and fans always think about something I haven't thought of. I've heard a lot of prevailing opinions about certain people being secretly characters who have died and have had their bodies transformed in face and background and everything. So there's been some pretty ludicrous fan theories, but on the whole, it's a pretty deep dive that a lot of the fan groups do in terms of working the internal logic, seeing how the world is put together, and then coming to either conclusions or hypotheses about what will happen next book. But I think letting that inform me is probably a bad thing. I think to some degree it has to, because I converse with fans a lot, and I take time in the signing lines, and I get to know who people's favorite characters are, what their favorite plot points are, who they despise, and who they feel a little bit guilty about liking. But for me, I think that having too much fan influence on the where the story goes can be deleterious to the story, because it's supposed to be absurd. It's supposed to be, the imaginings of one person, and even if you like or dislike parts of the story, being taken on a journey by one person as opposed to crowdsourcing it is the tradition of storytelling. So I think that it's incumbent upon me to remember why I like the series, remember what made me interested in it, sort of that tonal resonance, and recenter, find that, and write a new book.
Right, and I suppose there's also the point of where do you stop? If you could dig on everybody's fans' theories, you've got a whole other series there of those alone. So it's kind of a, it structurally wouldn't work either.
And it's for the reason why I primarily try to stay off Reddit. Those people go, they're too on the money sometimes, or too, far away, taking a different place I'd take it. But I don't want to be second guessing myself halfway through a novel. It's hard enough writing it,
Yeah, and I mean, you can't have people spoiling things that haven't even happened yet or been written yet, so that's true too.
Yeah, well, look at you. You've read the graphic novels, right? And already you went into Reddit, and you know a little bit about the books too now, too.
Yes, exactly. I did, yeah. I kind of, like I said, took a little, for viewers out there and readers, I did take a look at the subreddit because I found it so interesting that we've all been there, we've all had this series that we're so into, and sometimes the book isn't enough of a source. You just need to find some other way to get your teeth into it, because especially when if there hasn't been a film out yet or something that you can put yourself into, it's good to have other opinions to work off on your own. But
isn't that the great part about books, like those enclaves that get created, those little families, discussion families, because books don't have the marketing budget movies do, but because of that, and because look at it, it's basically I write something and then everyone interprets it their own way, and the fun thing is then discussing how people interpret it differently, and that's why movies don't have the edge on books in terms of being water cooler conversation. I mean, you still discover probably all your books by grassroots stuff, like your friend recommends it, your mom's reading it, a book's laying around, and you get curious. And it takes almost 6 points of context. You see it almost 6 times for you to really be like, I'm going to buy it now. Whereas movies,
this is true,
different. You almost get forced to go do it.
That's a very good point. I mean, you do go into, I feel like when you pick up a book in a bookshop, you're kind of looking at, you consider it a lot more than if someone said, let's go see a movie, let's just drop into this. And you just turn up at the cinema and you go in and that's fine. Whereas when you're picking up a book, it's a considered decision to be like, I'm going to pick up this book, Red Rising, because this looks great. So you take it home and you thought about getting it.
Exactly, and it's what you're sacrificing to get into it, because books take more time. Books take more engagement. Books take more consideration. And because of that, you're being a little more scrupulous with how you scrutinize things beforehand, instead of just like, I'll go to a movie. It's an event. It's a shared experience. Books are so intimate, you know? It's one person talking and another person interpreting, and then the mind of the reader takes it in a different direction than it may be intended to be. But because of that, it's personal, and, you know, that's why I love books.
And so, obviously, you know, you said the reading does take a lot more time, but I can imagine that writing it takes even more time. Have you found, like, what does a typical writing day look for you? What's your process?
Oh, God, me pulling my hair out.
Right? All day, 8 hours?
Yeah. Well, you know, when I'm really writing, it's probably more like 12 to 14 hours. So I do that. But then I'll go, you know, 2 weeks without writing, and then I'll do like another 3-week sprint or something. Not sustainable, but I really need to get emotionally involved before I can start writing. And a lot of times that takes build-up, preparation, you know, the things you have to have kind of lined up, ducks in a row to really make, for lack of a better word, an assault on the project. So I guess my methodology of writing is assaults. Like, I do tactical assaults.
Okay. No guerrilla warfare happening there. It's just straight in tactical.
Oh, no, I wish I could be this. I wish I could do the Stephen King. I like romanticize the idea of 4 hours in the chair in the morning. You do your work and you leave it and you live your life. But unfortunately, I'm not quite the pro he is yet. So I'm still figuring out. I'm still figuring out my methodology. Right.
And so where do you find your inspiration for these things? I know you mentioned Game of Thrones and stuff before, and obviously we're living in this age where kind of fantasy and sci-fi is happening a lot, which is great. It's almost everywhere. You know, it's in a lot of different, it's got its whole own subsection now. But do you kind of take any inspiration from real life? Do you see yourself in any of your characters? Is that something you're kind of trying to do? Have you ever written yourself in secretly? Are we going to find that you're on page 75 or something secretly in the background?
No, I haven't put myself in any of the stories. You know, I think that all characters are the splintering of the id. It's basically, you know, I'm trying to tell or trying to depict a sociopathic character, for instance. But it's not like I have a degree of sociopathy hidden behind my eyes.
Right.
Maybe I do. I hope not.
You haven't been told yet, anyway.
I think I'm far too sensitive for that. But I think that it's my interpretation of what sociopathy means based on all the confluence of sources, right? So you have this, you know, you create a well of information for every little category and subcategory, and then you draw on that well. So, and it's informed by my personality too, and what I find scary, what I find creepy, what I find disturbing, or what I find romantic and inducing of endorphin inducing. And so it's all a part of me. So all the characters are a little bit a part of me, but none of them are like, you know, my doppelganger thrown in. I think Stephen King's done that. I think he put himself in a story in the Dark Tower, actually, which was really weird. It was a little meta for my taste. Like, you know, it's probably why I'm not good on. It's probably why I'm not good on Twitter, and I can never write a personal essay. You know, I can write about far-flung worlds, but I could never like you know, school for me was horrible. When we had a 5-page essay, it would take me, you know, 3 weeks of procrastination and then 4 hours of, like, you know, 4 a.m. caffeine-fueled writing.
Right, but if they were like, put yourself in space, you'd have been there.
Oh yeah, I can predict that any day. I'm like, can I write my paper about spaceships? And they're like, no, it's about man's search for meaning. And I'm like, okay, well, there's an intersection there somewhere. Just let me find it.
Right, you could find that link.
I'm pretty sure I forgot half the question, but I answered half of it. So
exactly, it's what counts.
Yeah.
And so with obviously Sons of Ares, it's a graphic novel compared to your original, you know, Red Rising series, which is just straight print. So how did that decision come about? Why did you decide, okay, this prequel series, this one, which I have a copy of for everyone's here, as you can see.
Hey, look at that.
There it is. It's
I don't even have my hard copies yet. How do you have a hard copy? This is both.
What can I say? We have our sources. I won't disclose them. But this one, obviously, like I say, it's, you know, it's gorgeous that I have had a read through yesterday. But, you know, was it strange to kind of suddenly be writing for a completely different, not completely different, but, you know, arguably a visually different medium?
Very different. There's the old adage, you know, show don't tell, for translating books into scripts. Personally, I find that a little bit simple, because the best weapon a writer has, well, there's two things, right? The reader's brain and the ability to relate it to them, and then they project faces or visuals or basically tone onto a world as they perceive it. And so in, movies or graphic novels, any visual format, you have to give them that. You rob the reader of the ability to imagine like that, so you have to supplement it with something else. And then the second best weapon a writer has is digression. It's basically you can go down a rabbit hole on anything. For instance, a main character looks at his watch, and then you can go talk about 7 years of history or 50 years of history of the watch. You can't do that in any other medium. That's why novels are, the sacred. But graphic novels, I found, it's a lot more about suggestion. It's about suggesting the world is large. Instead of doing massive world building, you show the space dock, but then you also allude to other things. And it's these small little snippets, like little breadcrumbs you drop in order to build a world in graphic novels. At least that's my interpretation. It was a very different experience, mostly because Rick Hoskins did the lion's share of the actual writing on the project, and I came up with the story, the outline, and did dialogue tasks and things like that. So it's actually easier because I get to have someone else to discuss things with. And if I go off the wall a little bit, then someone can correct me or suggest something else. And so it's having a built-in governor because it's already collaboration. And then you bring in Eli Powell, who did the illustrations, and it lends an entirely different aspect to the whole arrangement, because until then you're just basically creating a script, and the script looks much like a graphic novel script, looks much like a screenplay. Now there's obviously different quirks to it, but until the inks and the sketches start coming in, you don't really have a tonal quality to the work. Whereas I start every book knowing the title, and then work from, and you asked earlier about inspiration. I find music helps inspire me to the tone of a project, and unless I know the tone of a project, it's difficult for me to get into it and write it and do those assaults I talked about. And what happens then is you actually have supplementary material when you get the inks in from Eli that you're like, okay, so in this next dialogue pass, I'm going to lean into certain aspects, lean into certain themes. Because if you look at the artwork, it has this sort of atavistic quality, this sort of jagged harshness to it, which I really enjoy because it gives it this primordial feel. It makes it feel like a myth, like a legend, which is one of the reasons I want to do a graphic novel. I knew I wanted to explore the Sons of Ares and the founding of it and the story of Fitchner, but I didn't know how I wanted to do it. I didn't want to do it in novel format because, well, to be honest, that's always felt when I'm in the Red Rising world telling this story through the medium of novel, I feel like I want to be on Darrow's path. And getting inside someone else's head or inside someone else's narrative, to me, felt odd. So I wanted to mix the mediums. And that's how I want to continue to explore the Red Rising world. New stories, sure. Talking about, going 700 years back to the Conquering or doing interstitial parts between the books. But I want to explore them in different mediums, mostly because I think that each story deserves its own medium, not simply for that own sake, but because each medium has a particular advantage. And these ones, it's the tonal quality of the whole culmination of the words of the story, then also the artwork itself. So
and I guess that's the interesting thing about it, is that it becomes more of a collaborative project then by the end, when you have this piece that, like you say, you kind of see the whole picture when it all comes together. Up until that point, you're kind of like, oh, right, I've only got what I think in my head, but how it's going to look on the page, you can't foresee. And we actually do have a question from our audience, which is quite a lot to do with what you just said, in that how much of the prequel do you think is world building and how much of it is kind of more storytelling? Do you think it's got a good balance, or how much does it kind of progress the story, do you think, overall?
It's I mean, it's a different story. It helps inform the original story. I think if you read the graphic novels and then revisit the initial novels, Red Rising, but if you read Sons of Ares 1 and Sons of Ares 2, Wrath, which obviously just came out, you will see hints, breadcrumbs, Cassandras, basically. So you'll have warnings about what might happen in the future. You'll have explanations for certain character actions. So in many ways, it is still storytelling. It's helping to inform as a supplementary work the original trilogy and even past that. But it also helps tell the story of the books, because it's doing the world building that exists in the books, but you don't get to see it, or I don't have time to explore it because of the pacing. So I would say it's both. And that's probably what makes it such a great question, because you see what I'm trying to do, which is, have a story, but then have it inform the other story, but then also world build for both.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a good question. That one came from Tracy, so thank you, Tracy, for that question.
Good job, Tracy.
Yeah, well done. You floored us with that one. Well done, Tracy. I actually do have a couple of other questions from the audience that I'd like to pose to you, because some of these are very good. We've got some very alert audience here to kind of what you're saying. So we have Natalie White here who says, do you have any tips on how to stop or limit procrastinating for writers? I need to finish something, but lo and behold, a butterfly.
Yeah, well, I used to be a lot better at it because I had sort of inbuilt mania. Now it actually takes strategery, to borrow from Saturday Night Live. That's not a real word. Bush never actually said that, but Will Ferrell
You're the author. We'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So strategery. I have this trick I do now in order to stop myself from procrastinating, where I have an hourglass that has an hour of sand in it. And I turn it over, and I'm not allowed to leave the desk until that hour is up. And instead of like an alarm, the alarm will alert you when you are done, right? The hourglass doesn't alert you. So sometimes you'll get carried away, and it'll be 30 minutes past the time that the sand has run out. And then you'll look up and then be like, oh, okay, I can take a break now. I can take a 5-minute respite and then recharge, because you need that. Maintaining full attention on something, anything, is very difficult. But what's also extremely negative to the writing process is checking your phone or checking your email or looking at those butterflies, because when you jar yourself out of the zone of concentration you're in, it takes, I think the studies are 7 to 15 minutes, I forget, 7 or 15 minutes to get back into what you were doing at the same level cognitively. And it's why, when you take a test, time seems to like stand still, right? And then an hour and a half's gone or 2 hours is gone. You're like, geez. And you get up and you're a little bit sweaty in the pits, and you're like, thank God that's done.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's how like writing sessions sometimes are. And I find it's better to do those sprints than just to set off without a roadmap. And a lot of times, for me, it's mandatorily not, or it's not tricking yourself into thinking you're being responsible by doing your other things instead of doing your writing. So the hour chunk it's only can be writing. I can't, unless the house is burning down, I can't go get up and do something. And that makes it happen. So I usually try to get in 6 chunks of those during the day. So 6 hours at least of working. And I think that's the best way to help stop procrastinating. Doing all these, reading all these self-help books that try to tell you to slim down your life by like eliminating clutter or to mentally reinforce yourself or to meditate or do any of these things. Those are all supplementary to you actually sitting down and doing it. So I find that the best companion is something tangible, not a clock, but that hourglass. Plus it makes me feel a little bit like Jafar. So
right, exactly. Yeah. That's always an added bonus to get to feel like that.
There you go.
Keep the robes while you're in. And good luck, Natalie, on your series. We do hope we'll get you on a couple of years. Just get your novel there.
And there are worse things that are distracted than by butterflies.
This is true. Exactly.
I got this puppy in the corner here who does all my distracting for me.
Honestly, if we could get that puppy on the mic here, it'd be great. But I don't think if he has any insight to Red Rising, please do.
See if she can answer a few questions. Let me bring her in.
So you are increasingly popular today with these questions. We've got lots of questions for you. We have Tabitha who wants to, she wants to know what your writing process was like, but we got that assault. We'll just tell her to get fighting. Ziha was wondering if you already have ideas for a new book series, or are you motoring on with what you have at the minute? Are you kind of on that one-way street to Red Rising, or do you have other things in the ethos floating around the place?
In terms of things in the back burner, I've got about 3 or 4 ideas I'm desperate to tackle. But I'm a completionist. My dog looks ridiculous. She's just poking. You can't see her, can you?
No, I can't. Deprived of the dog's content.
She's just peeking in, wondering what's going on. Why Dad's talking to a computer instead of taking her for a walk. I always have like a bunch of ideas that I want to chase. I've got 3 or 4 ideas that I'm obsessed with. But the difficulty is it's hard for me to brainstorm those ideas while I'm currently wrapped up in Red Rising. And I think it's, important to finish. I'm a completionist. I have to finish Red Rising before I'll let myself, go do those other things. So I'll complete the series and then move on. With this next, with the completion of the Iron Gold series I'm doing now.
Yes.
Though I may dabble, with Sons of Ares and things like that.
And Dennis wanted to know, will you write sci-fi after the series is over? Which I guess is, a good lead on from that, in that, are any of the other ideas on the back burner, are they similar in their kind of theme or genre? Or have you got, do you think sci-fi is the one for you? Or are you planning on dating around the genre pool?
Well, I think if you look at dating around the genre pool, look at that, Tinder for genre. I think the way to answer that question is more to look at what I'm writing. Like Red Rising is science fiction, yes, but the elements within it are mostly not science fiction. I'd say most of the elements that make the Red Rising world distinct are it being a combination of science fiction and what I talked about earlier, fantasy and military history.
And,
I think that I would not write another space opera, mostly because I've explored the genre as much as I'd like to, but I would probably write something with the mythic themes, the overtones, perhaps delving into a different mythology than the Greco-Roman. And I would, because I like that. I like how mythology can inform a story and lends it a sense of gravitas, but also we can learn while we're reading, and especially not just having the obvious references to Rome or the obvious references to the Greek gods, because everyone knows Ares, Aphrodite, and all those people. It's more interesting to me to delve into the myths that are a little bit more misunderstood and kind of oblique references to things. But it's the spirit behind Red Rising is very much it influences, which is Plato. His Republic, Antigone, the Sophocles plays, the Theban plays in general. And so while I combine that with science fiction, I wouldn't be adverse to combining a different mythology with a different genre. That said, I probably wouldn't do a Greco-Roman again, just because I've explored the themes through the Red Rising world. So I like mythology, like the themes being explored through whatever milieu you have, or whatever medium you use. So this is hypothetical, but exploring the the Tibetan Book of the Dead would be interesting, because it's that's not what the translation really means, but sorry, I'm going deep into the weeds here. Yes, there's other genres. All right.
We're pro other genres. Okay.
Pro other genres. That's later around the pool.
Yeah. And so Anya was wondering, she says, I'm always blown away by how many details your stories have. How do you keep track of all the little intricacies and tidbits, little comments, side notes, callbacks throughout all the books? Is there a huge folder of chaotic notes, a timeline, a spreadsheet, and this emoji? Just in case you need a visual.
I wish I had organizational skills. I'm going back to that. I wish I had this.
Right.
I do have one book that was like the initial book, which I did the world building in Red Rising before I started, which was scant, because I was I was so excited to dive into the story, and it has been filled out, the whole book, and I've got like a stack about this many leather-bound journals that my sister gave me that are filled with notes, yet I never reference them. So I feel as though more when I write something down, I'm hopefully encoding it into my long-term memory. You know how they teach you that if you write it down 3 times, it gets like you remember it better. And so I think it's a culmination of sticky notes, actually using the Red Rising Wikipedia, which the fans have been so kind as to deepen the knowledge base there, because it was, it came up and there was a lot of inaccuracies. And so I would actually put the inaccuracies from the Red Rising Wiki in my new story. And then I was like, wait, that doesn't sound true. I don't think that's
I wouldn't write that.
Oh, no. And so I sometimes get led astray by my lack of organizational skills and my need to rely on crowdsourcing information. But a lot of it is rereading. A lot of it's rereading. A lot of it is these character sheets that I do before I do a book. I always write down on a sheet of paper, or each character's name on a sheet of paper, that probably about 20 of them, the main characters, a secondary, and then show it. What do they want? What are their obstacles? What are their familial connections? What are their grievances and their grudges? What are their aspirations? And that's an easy way to keep track of things, because that's all fluid, and you also get to track growth progress that way and see how to bring someone's character arc to a poetic conclusion, or to indict them based on their one, fatal flaw, which is a very Greek way of going about things. If you look at any of the Theban plays, whenever anyone goes down, whenever they die, it's always because of the base characteristic that they have. Antigone's stubbornness, and she dies a little too stubborn, even though she did, there's a lot of reasons behind her dying, for bearing her brother. But a lot of it is also her hubris, her stubbornness. Oedipus Rex, it's his hubris that brings him to his knees, or that and sleeping with his mom. But I think that keeping track of those elements are more important than keeping track of the inside jokes and things like that.
Yes. And so, like you say, with those influences and with there being so much, and, a question we have here from Zaria is that since Rome wasn't built in a day, how do you pick and choose what elements you want to add for your series? Obviously, you have a lot of these influences, and that's a huge, huge part of history. So, like that, are you basing them off stories that, like Antigone's and things like that, where you have set stories that you think that suits me, I don't care about that one, that's fine?
It's a great question. A lot of it is the initial process of brainstorming for a book. So I'll have all these ideas, and probably about 30% of them actually get into the book, because otherwise it's too crammed full of pivotal scenes and stuff. But a lot of it is just keeping this stuff by my desk. These are kind of my influences for the next one, and it's just when you have these. Oh, there we go. When you have these stories always like by you, and you get to reference them while you're writing, it's easier to see what matches up with the tale you're telling. But for me, until I do my first draft, until I finish that up, I don't know the full picture of what the story will look like. Now, that's not to say that there isn't even a full picture when I finish my first draft. But for me, it's identifying in that first draft the thematic through lines, or like the thematic journey, both of the main character and the other secondary characters, but also the overall story. And that kind of ties into that, what I talked about earlier about tone. Until I have a full picture of it, and I can't ever do this in outlines, it's just my brain doesn't conceive of things that way. I have to be in the writing. And once I'm writing and along the journey, I'll find things that don't match, things that are more resonant. And that's why I keep reading its sources of inspiration throughout the series and throughout when I'm actually writing, because it helps remind me of things I might miss. Because I'm an opportunist when I'm a writer. This whole thing about planting and what's the other one? Planters and pantsers. I'm kind of in between. I'm more of a pantser, but I'm a pantser only because I'm an opportunist. Because I'll be writing something, and then I'll see an opportunity to bring something in that happened 3 books ago. I see an opportunity to do a brief allusion to Euripides or something like that. And it's mostly just seeing them as they come along. Some people are clever, can see it in the outlining process. I think of those people as are similar to me as amphibians to reptiles. Like, your brains just work differently.
Right, yeah.
Actually, I don't know if their brains work differently, but their skin does. And their blood.
And their blood, exactly. It's different color, definitely. And so you mentioned briefly there the next book. We do have a question from Candice, who wants to know if you have any hints on the name of book 6.
No.
She's got you there with that one.
No. It's in English.
Oh, there you go. So there you go.
So
exclusive,
far.
guys. Take that to the sun. Take that to the mirror.
Yeah.
It's going to be in English.
I don't think Random House would let me publish
there you go.
A Latin title, and they're just like, no.
No, it's good.
A Latin title. And in all fairness, it was a ridiculous idea. So no hints yet, but a lot of that is me debating between 2 or 3 names, and I got to figure out which one really works.
And so we do have a lot more requests actually in the comments for some more inside scoops, mostly in that, is there any news on a show or movie adaptation of Red Rising? Dying to know is in caps here, so it's a very pertinent question. And we did get one earlier about, what is in the pipeline for the Red Rising TV series.
Gotcha. So we've been in development. We were in development for quite a while, and right now we are in a stage where it either go or will not. So the problem is I'm not allowed to say anything, which is real fun for you guys, because you keep asking the same questions and I keep giving you permutations of the same answer, which is hopefully I'll be able to tell you soon. And hopefully it'll be good news. I'm optimistic right now. But it looks like
keep an eye out.
We got some pretty cool people working on it, and I think we might have a pretty cool thing to announce in hopefully a month. But I said that 4 months ago, and we're still here. Hey, but we're not out of the game, so that's a good thing. So it could have gone wrong.
It's good to dangle that carrot and keep people waiting for the news.
yeah, you can't. Got to string you along, sucker.
Exactly. And so I actually have a lot of requests in the comments here to see the puppy. That's a very, very...
We'll bring you back.
She's very popular. So Alina was wondering, she was wondering if you have if the Count of Monte Cristo has some influences on Darrow as a character. Clever, cunning, ambitious, drama queens, best male characters ever made.
Drama queen, I love it. He is very dramatic. Yeah, 100%. I'd say that the closest character in fiction to Darrow is probably Edmond Dantes. Now, the reason I made that link and that connection isn't so much a stylistic one as when I was reading Count of Monte Cristo, I think I was like 13 or so, I was absolutely just flabbergasted by how vicious Edmund was as a character, how cold he was, how cruel he was, even to the point of becoming an anti-hero for many points, particularly his dealings with Mercedes. And I wanted to see that sort of reptilian nature in a main character, because you always have that. You have the Walter Whites, and you have the edgy characters, the anti-heroes, etc. But what I wanted to do is create a character who wasn't running from or resisting the call to destiny, so to speak. There's always in the hero's journey, was it Hero with a Thousand Faces? There's that period where the hero has to resist the call. It's kind of a stalwart fixture of Hollywood films now. It's that 5-minute thing where they go like soul search and then come back and say, let's do it. It's that, and that always irritated me. It always irritated me that a character would turn their back on the bad guy after beating him and allow the bad guy one last thrust so that he could turn around and stab the bad guy and have a morally clean kill. It's like almost every Bond kill. Bond almost always doesn't kill the bad guy, but the bad guy can't let go of his nature, so he tries to kill Bond when he's at Bond's mercy, and then Bond has to kill him because it's a tidy story, but it's also morally tidy and not indicting your main character for being a bad person. Darrow, sometimes when he has his main character, so when he has a villain on the ropes, he'll just end it. He'll just kill him, even if the guy's powerless. And I think that was something I wanted to bring to my main character, particularly in The Passage. And it was something I saw in Edmond Dantes when I was younger, and so there was a pretty firm connection between the two.
And so, speaking of deaths, we do have some questions about those, but we are purposely not asking so as to not spoil for others, because we do have a few people wondering about character deaths, but we're gonna have to skip over those that our vast audience haven't gotten there yet.
Treat all my characters. Like, she's the bloodthirsty one. She's vicious.
And so, Dylan wanted to know, how do you balance reading other books and borrowing ideas and not just taking them? And also, are you excited for Dune, the film coming out later this year?
Yeah, super jazzed for Dune. It's my favorite, I guess, pure science fiction book, even though I think it's more science fantasy. I'd say that the older a book is, the more you can get away with borrowing ideas. I don't read many modern books. I just don't. I think for two reasons. One, I haven't read all the dead people's books yet, and they've been vetted through time. And so I feel like, it's my duty to build my foundation. And modern books, a lot of times, I don't want to be influenced by a modern book. I don't want to write what other people are writing or to take their ideas or to do that. So I'd say, I guess my most modern influence is probably Battle Royale or, William Golding's 1960s Lord of the Flies, and Dune was 1960s. So a lot of times I go back to there, and I think that it's about if it's a quirk in the story and you borrow it from someone else, that's okay. But if it's kind of it gets to a point if you're copying the entire narrative, if you're copying the growth of a hero, like Edmond Dantes, for instance, is borrowed from. No, it's not borrowed. He's inspired Darrow, but the thing is, their narratives are totally different. Their personalities are totally different. Their actions are totally different. Their look is totally different. Their names are different. But if you're, riffing on a name and changing one letter in the name, that's messed up. If you're copying exactly their hero's journey, that's messed up. Replacing, I don't know, if I was doing like a story and I had, a boy growing up in a desert climate, and he met a crazy old man who was, his mentor, then you're kind of riffing off of Star Wars a bit. But then again, that's riffing off of 1,000 things before it. So I don't know. It's a muddy line, and it's always, if you like the story, you're going to say it's inspired by. If you don't like the story, you're going to say someone ripped someone off.
Exactly.
That said,
this is true.
There are more egregious examples of both.
And so
I don't know.
I do have some kind of more character questions. Lisa wants to know, what character was the most difficult for you to develop?
I would say the most difficult to develop. A lot of them aren't really planned to develop. They kind of just pop onto the page. And then because, that's the opportunist in me, because I see a particular character personality that would be interesting in a particular situation or a particular group of people. And so I create the character, and that's where characters come from. And then I create all the backstory for them. So it seems like they're there all the time, but really it's a second draft character.
Okay.
Probably the most difficult, however, to answer the question would be either Severo, because how do you make him? He's the most popular character by far, probably maybe on par, a little bit surpassing Darrow. And I'd say the difficulty in him is making him not just the comedic sidekick, because he's far deeper than that, and creating some real resonance with his emotions amongst the readers. So how do you do that while still maintaining his humor and still maintaining his levity in the story, but also expanding his character over 5 books? And a lot of that is give and take, push and pull, figuring things out as they go. But his character didn't really exist in the initial conception of Red Rising, and more came up because I found him to be an interesting tertiary character, and he sort of bloomed on the page. So he was the most difficult, but mostly because it was tightrope walking with him. But Mustang was also difficult because I do her voice or her POV in book 5. So that was the hardest one to write. The hardest character to create was Severo, even though he was completely natural.
Do you have a favorite or a least favorite character in the Red Rising series? Are you going to be like a mother of 4 children who says that she doesn't have a favorite?
Oh no, I definitely have my favorites. My current favorite is the Minotaur of Mars, Apollonius Alvalii Wrath, which is Greek to you, but to people who have read Iron Gold and Dark Age, he's just this he's like an opera and a human being. He's larger than life. He's got probably tons of different psychological complexes, probably histrionic, sociopathic, and maybe psychopathic, and narcissistic. And so he's extremely fun, mostly because whenever he comes onto the page, it's just like I get to use big words and, I don't know, act like I'm writing Paradise Lost.
Right. And Alina said that Darrow and Virginia are unbeatable as a team, at least as of yet. What do you think of them now, almost 6 books in?
What do I think of them now, 6 books in? I think that as long as their priorities are aligned, they're perfect. They're perfect. They're a great team, but a lot of times their priorities are not. And sometimes Darrow will think, and Mustang will think, that a path is more conducive to success and to their aims than, and their partner might not agree. And so it's sometimes Darrow will take something a step further than Mustang will, so which causes him to conceal information from her. Now, one of my things that always frustrates me in movies is if these characters communicated, there would be no story, and there's a lot of times no reason for the lack of communication. So now to create narrative tension, you have to have hard situations come up. Now, if you have an unbeatable team that communicates perfectly, there's not going to be an unbeatable situation. So the key then is creating real reasons why they wouldn't communicate, real obstructions, either physical, thematic, or personal. And the case of the new series is personal. So the things that get in Darrow and Mustang's way is their not inability to communicate, but their private plans, which creates the confusion, which sows the seeds for the hardships in books 4, 5, and 6 eventually.
And so Simone then wanted to know, I listened to your books on Audible and was rather blown away by Tim Gerard Reynolds' performance. He set such a tone and influenced my experience with the story so much. How did you choose the people you collaborated with on the graphic novels, and how much back and forth did you have choosing the flavour and the tone of the graphics themselves? I know you touched on that earlier, but like we said with the mixed mediums, how do you choose a team like that for those?
I mean, it's very difficult when you're hearing someone's voice. You have a pretty good gauge of how they'll speak, but you don't know how they'll do your characters. Tim, I selected him out of a group of 8 people or 6 people that were presented to me. Originally, I thought I was going to do the narration myself, and I had all my epic voices and stuff. And then I hear Tim's, I'm like, all right, I'll stick to my lane. And much the same way with Art and with another writer, Rick, coming on, is you can look at their prior work and hope that the things you like in it will show in your work and show up in your product with them, and you hope the things you dislike are their other collaborators' fault, not theirs. And so it's a grab bag. You have to eventually go with your gut. If you go with your head, then you'll indict yourself for not going with your gut. But if you go with your gut, well, you can forgive yourself for not going with your head. And so I always go with my gut on making those decisions.
Okay. I did want to just briefly, before we get back to some more of our questions, we do have a giveaway on Bookstr today, which is pinned in the comments below. We have some really, really cool bits. We have the hardcover bit that Pierce says he hasn't actually got himself. So if you want to beat the author to it, we do have, we've got a couple of copies of these hardcover versions to give you. But not only that, we have a lot of custom jewellery. So this jewellery is by Badali Jewellery, and it is gorgeous. I've got a couple of bits of them here, but there's a lot of like really cute pendants, and there's a couple of different key rings and things like that. And we have some t-shirts, which I'll take here, which I did want to personally wear for this video, but we have to give them away to, all you people. So this is here, and so we have the t-shirts, we have the jewellery, and we have some of these guys here as well, which I don't know if you can see me here. So all you have to do is just enter below. The giveaway is pinned in the comments, so amongst all of your wonderful questions. So you can enter that there, and we will be having a winner in the next couple of weeks. So that is just worth noting. Pierce, you cannot enter, so don't even try.
I want to, but the Badali team is actually, that's one of my favorite joint projects we've done. They've done a great job putting together the jewelry for the series. A lot of it is, the Red Rising pins and necklaces and earrings and stuff like that. But they have a lot of new merchandise expanding on the new houses and the characters in the new series. And so it's fun to see. That's one of my favorite collaborations, is just seeing what they come up with, because I can just imagine there's a blacksmith back there just, hammering away. I have no idea what the effects are. I hope it's a blacksmith. I don't know. I don't know what they
Right. He's got the overalls and the big hammer, and he's back there, just one guy.
Yeah, but they might have I think they have an all-female team over there. So I imagine that it's just like this coven of blacksmiths, like apprentice blacksmiths.
They only meet in the woods. And so I did have just a couple more questions. I have one question from I do have a question that I can't actually pronounce the name. It is Russian. I took a Russian class once 5 years ago, and it hasn't stuck. But this person would like to know, did you choose the name of Io after the Greek goddess Eos, Aurora, goddess of sunrise?
Yes, I did. Often she's depicted as well as the goddess of the dawn to a degree. But my funny thing is, my sister had a hamster. I think was named maybe Dio or. Yeah, I know her hamster was named Eos, and the hamster unfortunately died, a guinea pig, and unfortunately perished, and we had a backyard burial. Apparently it resonated with me. But yes, that was the inspiration.
Very good. So I think that could be the end of our audience questions, which you guys have been great for handling them, and we have a lot of questions there. I guess just very lastly, what's next for you and what's next for Red Rising? Have you got any grand plans? Or are you just, I say, you're an opportunist, or are you just taking it as it comes, seeing where it all goes? So, in the plans for Red Rising, that's where the scheming comes in. I have more plans for this series, than actually for how I'm going to tell the story. But yeah, I'm going to finish out the Iron Gold series, which I'm doing now. Finish out the Sons of Ares. So I have one more Sons of Ares that'll be coming out. And then after I finish the novel, I'll probably move on to something else. Now, obviously, we've been working on TV for quite a while. In 2014, there was a film in development. And then I got stuck in development hell, but I had the rights back, and I resisted people's desires to option it for, I think, 2 or 3 years, mostly because I was building my own plans behind it. And that has, more to do with bringing on the creative team than bringing on the production elements. I mean, the producers and studios, etc. And so by finding that core group of creative individuals to work with, been able to guide the project in a way that has given me more control and also makes me more of a schemer. But then I also get stuck in like the Hollywood time cycle, which is like everything takes 5 years to get done. But the next plan is after I finish the book series and the graphic novels, is for it to be a TV show. And hopefully I'll have more on that soon, as I said earlier. if that comes to fruition, do you see yourself making a little cameo role, popping in for a minute, jumping back out again?
Man. Yeah, I want to play EO. Yeah.
Okay. You bet. There's no auditions for that role. It's yours. No one else need apply.
I'll pop in to be like killed or something. I'm a big fan of the extended version of Lord of the Rings because I love seeing Peter Jackson take it. I mean, I think he's like eating that carrot in. He's eating carrot in Fellowship. He's a pirate who gets speared or shot by Legolas in Return of the King. And I think in Two Towers he might have been on. I think he might have either been in Uruk-hai or might have been on the Wall. I'm not sure. He was one of the... Anyway, I'd love to die in my series. That'd be fun.
Your opportunities are endless, and you can write your own death too, which is even better.
Personally, I just hope it's really gratuitous, and, there's a very long close-up of my face as I perish. That's all I want.
Of course, really. as the light leaves your eyes, as they say. And so...
That is the sum of my acting experience.
Yeah. Oscar-worthy, I'm sure. And so where can people find you on social media? That's our last question for you.
Yeah, so Twitter, it's Pierce_Brown. On Instagram, it's Pierce Brown Official. Yeah, it's a real official account. And
it's got a tick and everything, guys, I'm telling you.
Facebook's tricky. Just search Pierce Brown, and there's like a fan page, and then there's also Hick St. Leone's fan page, which is fun for people who really want to dive into memes and gossip theories about the series. So Hick St. Leone's is that group. But I'm not on it. I just peek in every now and then to be a creep.
Like your cameo, just jump in.
Like my cameo, like my dog just
exactly.
did. You didn't see, but your eyes were it was just her eyes and her snout, like it's precious. That's what I think.
We're interviewing her next.
My eyes and my snout, and my ears. I'm just paying attention.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us today, and thank you for answering all the questions. And thank you for answering asking all the questions to our lovely audience. And to check up, we've got all of that social media info there. Put some of it in the comments, and our giveaway information is there as well. So thank you so much, and we'll see you again next time.
Signing off.
Thank you, Pierce.
All right.
Yes.
Bye, guys.
You're
Thanks
good.
for tuning
Thank
in.
you.